Marcus Johnson was a quiet, observant student with an intensity in his eyes far beyond his years. His piercing gaze seemed to reflect the weight of the world around him, capturing the complexities of a life woven with both hardship and resilience. Growing up in a struggling urban neighborhood, he navigated the narrow alleys and crumbling sidewalks, where the air was often thick with tension and the distant sounds of sirens served as a constant reminder of the precariousness of life. Marcus had learned early on that life was not always fair. He watched as his neighbors, many of whom shared stories of dashed dreams and relentless challenges, faced battles that seemed insurmountable. His dark skin and gentle demeanor set him apart, allowing him both to feel the weight of prejudice and the warmth of empathy in a community where every day was a fight against systemic inequalities and economic hardship. Though academically talented and kind-hearted, often volunteering to help his peers with homework or support them during tough times, Marcus found himself constantly wrestling with forces he never asked for. Systemic neglect from institutions that should have nurtured him, a broken educational system that often dismissed students like him as statistics rather than individuals, and a family burdened by poverty that threatened to overshadow his aspirations. Yet within the confines of his reality, he harbored a flicker of hope, one that whispered that he could rise above the obstacles, fueled by the love for his mother and the desire to change the narrative of his life. In the labyrinth of concrete and faded hopes that defined his hometown, opportunities were not just scarce, they were but a distant dream, slipping further away with each passing day. The streets echoed with the stories of those who had come before him, tales filled with abandoned aspirations and shattered promises. Marcus's single mother, a tenacious woman battling the relentless waves of illness and the monotony of low-wage jobs, donned the mantle of protector and provider, fighting valiantly each day to keep the fragile walls of their modest home from crumbling under the weight of their struggles. Each morning she would rise before dawn, readying herself for yet another grueling day, her resolve burning bright despite the fatigue etched in her features. It was in those quiet moments that Marcus saw not just a mother, but a warrior, someone who was intent on stitching together a tapestry of hope in a world that seemed intent on unraveling it. Amid the daily challenges of empty stomachs, misunderstandings with those who couldn't comprehend their plight, and the glaring reality of limited access to quality resources, desperation sometimes crept in like a thief in the night, leaving marks on even the most well-intentioned hearts. It painted shadows around their laughter and clouded moments of joy with the persistent reminder of their struggles. Yet within the comforting embrace of their modest home, love persisted, igniting a spark of resilience that whispered to Marcus that they could still believe in a brighter tomorrow. As he slipped out the door, the cold bite of the evening air swept across his skin, bringing with it a mixture of exhilaration and dread. Each hurried step echoed in his mind, drowning out the whispers of guilt that began to rise. It was a small theft, hardly a crime worth mentioning, yet the abruptness of his actions gnawed at his conscience, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste. The streets looked different in the muted light of the street lamps, shadows dancing around him as if warning him of the choices he was making. With his heart racing, Marcus darted into a nearby alley, seeking refuge from the prying eyes of the world. He pressed his back against the cold brick wall, clutching the stolen items tightly as if they were a lifeline, a ticket to immediate relief from a gnawing hunger that had plagued him for days. In the stillness of the night, he pulled out one of the gum packs, its vibrant colors a cruel reminder of joy that felt so distant in his current state. The sweet scent wafted up to his nose, momentarily distracting him from the swirling storm of emotions inside. With a shaky breath, he unwrapped a piece, feeling the smooth texture between his fingers. He chewed slowly, a feeble attempt to mask the gnawing emptiness that had settled in the pit of his stomach. Yet with each chew, the thrill of the theft was swiftly replaced by a surge of shame as memories of past mistakes resurfaced, a cycle he thought he had broken. Before long, the euphoria faded, replaced by a sense of impending doom. He could almost hear the sirens wailing in the distance, see the flashing lights chasing him down. What if someone recognized him? What if the shop owner had noticed and decided to report him? He paced in the small alley, his mind racing through the consequences of his actions. Was this the life he wanted? A life shackled to the fear of getting caught, spiraling further into a darkness that threatened to consume him? With a mix of desperation and resolve, Marcus made the decision to return the items. The idea of facing the store owner filled him with dread, but he knew that the only way to reclaim some part of himself was to confront the guilt head-on. Adrenaline surged as he took one last deep breath and retraced his steps back through the alley, the stolen goods still clutched tightly in his hand. The gentle glow of the store's fluorescent lights beckoned him forward, illuminating the path to redemption. As he approached the entrance, he felt the weight of every choice he had made pressing down on him. This was more than just gum and water, it was a turning point. With every step towards the door, Marcus realized that facing his fears, rather than running from them, was the only way to rewrite the narrative of his life. And so, with a trembling hand, he pushed the door open, ready to embrace whatever came next. As he stepped inside, the familiar scent of stale candy and fresh coffee wrapped around him like a warm blanket. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his arrival, and the store clerk glanced up, a hint of recognition sparking in her eyes. Marcus had been here before, wandering the aisles during the darkest points of his life, seeking comfort in the simplicity of routine. But today felt different. Today he wasn't the lost soul searching for a quick fix. Today he was a man determined to reclaim his story. He moved deliberately down the aisles, examining the bright packaging of snacks and the kaleidoscope of choices that surrounded him. Choices, he thought, were a powerful thing. He paused for a moment at the candy section, where vibrant colors danced on the shelves, reminding him of a time when sweetness was the remedy for his troubles. But instead of reaching for the sugary solace, he picked up a bottle of water. It felt symbolic, a step towards hydration and clarity, a promise to nourish his body rather than drown his sorrows. As he approached the counter, the clerk offered him a soft smile. "It's great to see you back," she said, her voice laced with warmth. "You seemed a bit lost last time." Her words cut through the air, sharp yet kind, and Marcus felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. "I was," he admitted, meeting her gaze. "But I'm trying to find my way." There was a moment of silence, a shared understanding of struggles unspoken. "We all are, in one way or another," she replied, ringing up his items. "What matters is taking that first step." Her comment resonated with him, echoing his own realizations about progress and recovery. He thanked her, suddenly aware that this small interaction carried more significance than he had anticipated. Feeling emboldened, Marcus made his way to the door, ready to face the outside world. The sunlight greeted him with open arms, a stark contrast to the fluorescent glow of the store. With a deep breath, he stepped into the light, squinting slightly as he soaked in the new energy around him. He realized that this was just the beginning. The door he had opened wasn't just to the store, but to a future he was carving for himself. One where he embraced not only his triumphs, but also his failures as part of a greater journey. He took a few steps forward, his heart racing with possibilities, ready to meet whatever awaited him on the horizon. That single act of petty theft did not exist in isolation. It was the culmination of a lifetime of struggles that began long before Marcus reached his teenage years. Growing up in a dilapidated neighborhood where boarded-up windows were more common than vibrant storefronts, he navigated a world marred by violence, neglect, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Insufficient funding for his school had stripped away basic resources, leaving classrooms filled with outdated textbooks and teachers stretched thin, struggling to nurture the potential of their students. Amid these adversities, he yearned for more, a chance to dream, to escape the confines of his surroundings. Yet the harsh reality was that society quickly rushed to label him and others like him as delinquents, judging their choices through the narrow lens of preconceived notions rather than understanding the complexities of their circumstances. Marcus knew in his heart that he did not intend to be a criminal. He saw himself as a victim of circumstance, a young soul caught in the unforgiving crossfire of a system designed to perpetuate inequality. Instead of support, he encountered barriers that made basic survival a daunting challenge. The theft, although minor in substance, was born out of a desperate plea for help. It stemmed from the need to provide for himself and his family in a moment of overwhelming hopelessness. With each passing day, as he faced increasingly dire situations, he found himself making choices he never thought he would consider. This small act, which many would dismiss as a simple mistake, would soon cast him into a legal battle that exposed the raw intersection of social and economic injustice, revealing how easily a life could be derailed by circumstances beyond one's control. Within days of the incident, the local authorities apprehended Marcus, a decision that would set into motion a whirlwind of events he could never have anticipated. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, Marcus found himself grappling with confusion and fear. The police report painted a picture of a boy whose life thus far had been filled with the mundane chapters of adolescent school life. His record showed no prior incidents of trouble, and his teachers often remarked on his dedication and quiet demeanor. Yet despite these accolades, it was the label of being a young student from a disadvantaged background that loomed large over his fate, complicating the proceedings at every turn. In a system that often failed to see beyond its own biases, Marcus faced an uphill battle. His case was swiftly moved to juvenile court, where the stakes felt impossibly high. His future, much like his self-worth, now hung by a fragile thread. In those cold, sterile hallways of the courthouse, he began to grasp the sobering reality that a single moment of folly could unravel the intricate tapestry of his life. The weight of societal expectations and the harsh judgments that accompanied his situation began to press down on him, creating a storm of anxiety and uncertainty about what lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus found himself ensnared in a whirlwind of legal jargon and procedural requirements that felt foreign and overwhelming. His attorney, a young woman named Jessica, was passionate but spread thin, juggling a multitude of cases. Each time they met, she wore a determined expression, fueled by a desire to advocate for those like him who had been overlooked by a system designed to protect, yet often failed to serve fairly. "Marcus," she said one afternoon, her tone softening as they sat across from each other in a cramped conference room. "I know it feels like the world is against you right now, but there's a way out of this. We can make them see who you really are." Those words lingered in his mind as he recounted the moments leading up to his arrest, the misunderstandings, the impulse decisions fueled by fear and desperation. Flashes of memories flickered through his consciousness. Laughter with friends, the warmth of family gatherings, but they were tainted now with the shadows of judgment and doubt. It became harder to distinguish how he was perceived versus who he genuinely was. Determined to reclaim his voice amidst the noise of a system that often labeled him as a statistic, Marcus began to participate in the court's mandated rehabilitation program. It was in those sessions that he encountered others with stories layered in pain and redemption. Each shared experience nudged the walls of isolation he had built around himself slightly ajar, allowing glimmers of hope to seep through. One evening, as they passed around a talking stick in a circle meant for open dialogue, Marcus listened intently as others recounted their battles, not just with the law, but with societal invisibility. Each story resonated with him, igniting a flicker of empathy for those deemed forsaken. It was through their connections that he began to recognize the fragility of their collective humanity, fostering a sense of purpose within him that he hadn't anticipated. By the time of his hearing approached, Marcus felt a shift within himself. No longer simply a victim of circumstance, he was becoming a young man who understood the complexities of identity shaped by more than just a singular act of defiance. The anxiety that once gripped him was now intertwined with a burgeoning resolve to advocate not only for his own future, but for those who felt equally unheard. In those sterile hallways, he was not merely fighting for his freedom, he was planting the seeds of understanding and compassion grounded in the belief that everyone deserved a chance to rewrite their narrative. And as he entered that courtroom, an arena where futures shifted with the stroke of a pen, he resolved to embrace every ounce of the journey that led him here as he stood up, ready to speak not just for himself, but for every youthful spirit trapped behind the walls of prejudice. It was time for the world to see him, and to see others like him, not through the lens of their mistakes, but through the power of their potential. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the gavel behind him, a constant reminder of the power held in that room. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind, but he quashed it, recalling the faces of those who inspired him, the mentors he met during his time in the program, the friends who dared to dream in the darkest of circumstances, and the community that embraced him despite the label society preferred. Each story shared in the dimly lit corners of their meeting place whispered strength into his heart, urging him to rise to this occasion. As he stepped forward, he could see the faces of the jurors, some hardened by years of experience, others still holding on to traces of idealism. He pondered their judgment, Would they grasp the nuances of his story? Would they see that he was a product of circumstance, not merely a collection of poor choices? He cleared his throat and began his testimony, weaving in tales from his youth that mirrored the struggles of many around him. Sonarm, I stand before you today not as a victim, but as a voice for the voiceless, he proclaimed, feeling the fire of conviction ignite within him. I was once lost in a world that only defined me by my failures, yet I found my way through the strength of those who refused to let me go. In every community across this city, there are young souls who, like me, are fighting against a tide of stereotypes and bias. With each word, he painted a vivid picture, recounting the day he met his mentor, a former inmate who had transformed his life through mentorship. He spoke of the programs designed to rehabilitate rather than punish, the importance of seeing potential rather than past transgressions. He described the transformation that occurred not only within him, but also throughout the community as others began to believe in the power of second chances. Change doesn't occur in isolation. It thrives in a community that believes in growth, he asserted, his voice growing stronger with each point made. His plea was not merely for himself, it was for every young person ensnared by systemic barriers. As he concluded, he locked eyes with the judge, hoping to break through the walls of preconceived notions that loomed large. I stand here, not just for my freedom, but for the possibility of a brighter future for us all. Let us not be defined by our past, but rather enlightened by the lessons learned within it. If given the chance, I promise to honor that belief. The silence that followed was thick with tension. He could feel the room around him shift, the weight of his words lingering in the air. Perhaps, just perhaps, he had painted a new narrative, one where hope could coexist with redemption and the shimmering possibility of tomorrow. As he took his seat, his heart raced not out of fear, but from a sense of purpose, buoyed by the belief that change was within reach if only people dared to see beyond the surface. The day of the trial dawned gray and somber, as if the very elements conspired to mirror the gravitas of the moment. The heavy clouds hung low in the sky, casting a muted light that seemed to swallow the vibrancy of everyday life, leaving behind a landscape cloaked in a sense of impending judgment. As Marcus approached the courthouse, a chill ran down his spine, not just from the brisk air, but from the weight of his circumstances pressing down on him like a leaden shroud. The courtroom itself stood as a cold, imposing chamber, its walls lined with dark oak that absorbed sound and warmth alike. Row upon row of solemn portraits, depicting the stern faces of past magistrates, seemed to loom overhead as silent witnesses, reminding everyone of the weight of tradition and the seriousness of the proceedings. In this austere space, Marcus sat beside his father, who wore an expression of pained anticipation, and his social worker, a compassionate presence aimed at providing support, yet burdened by the gravity of the day's events. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear of what lay ahead, but from the emotional turmoil swirling inside him, a chaotic mixture of regret for actions taken and a fierce defiance against the labels being thrust upon him. The warmth of his father's reassuring grip and the soft, empathetic gaze from his social worker were small comforts in an environment that felt overwhelmingly harsh. As he glanced down at the polished surface of the wooden table, his dark eyes mirrored the tempest within, filled with a blend of remorse for a path he felt had spiraled out of control and a stubborn resolve not to be defined by past mistakes. Marcus knew he stood at a crossroads where the decisions made in this somber chamber could alter the course of his life forever. As the proceedings began, the judge, an older man with a stern yet empathetic presence, carefully recounted the details of the case before him, his deep-set eyes scanning the courtroom filled with eager and anxious faces. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable reminder that the consequences of today's decisions would echo far beyond these walls. The prosecution, representing the state's interests, painted a stark picture of a deliberate act of theft. Their arguments were meticulously crafted, emphasizing the need for deterrence to safeguard community values, a community that was fragile and already beleaguered by rising crime rates. They presented testimonies from victims who spoke of their anguish, evoking sympathy and outrage in equal measure, painting Marcus not just as a defendant, but as a threat to societal order. However, the tide of the trial shifted dramatically during cross-examination, as the defense stepped in with compelling testimony that illuminated the daunting circumstantial pressures Marcus had long endured. An expert witness, a psychologist well-versed in the impact of socioeconomic trauma, took the stand to provide a broader context for Marcus's actions. He recounted, with empathy, the relentless burden of his mother's struggles with overwhelming medical bills, an incessant battle that loomed large over their household. He spoke of the nightmarish reality of living paycheck to paycheck, where even basic necessities often took precedence over educational aspirations. The courtroom, usually cool and detached, felt an emotional shift as the struggles of poverty and the trauma of financial instability were laid bare in the public record. It became chillingly clear that Marcus's promising academic record, once a source of hope and potential, was slowly being choked by the suffocating grip of financial and emotional stress. The defense painted a portrait of a young man who, rather than representing criminality, was a victim of systemic failures, illustrating how society had conspicuously failed him before he ever failed himself. In one of the most poignant moments of the trial, a community social worker rose to speak, her presence embodying both compassion and resilience. With measured words that carried the weight of countless untold stories, she explained how socioeconomic forces, rather than moral decay, had led Marcus down this troubled path. She articulated the stark reality of his childhood, painting a vivid picture of a young boy navigating a minefield of systemic racism and economic disparities that infiltrated every aspect of his life. Each day was a struggle, where the lack of access to basic resources, such as quality education and healthcare, perpetuated a cycle of disadvantage. The counselor recounted how in his neighborhood, the smallest misstep, perhaps a moment of youthful exuberance mistaken for delinquency, could spiral into a lifelong burden of labels and judgments that would haunt him long after the moment had passed. As she spoke of the systemic injustices and societal neglect that marginalized young men like Marcus, the courtroom fell silent, every individual captivated by her heartfelt testimony. Even the judge's face softened imperceptibly, a subtle hint of empathy crossing his typically stoic demeanor as the weight of her words lingered in the air, challenging the very foundations upon which their legal system stood and prompting a moment of introspection about the true meaning of justice and accountability. The stalwart defense attorney, a figure of unwavering resolve, then called upon one of Marcus's most influential teachers, an educator whose kindness and passion for teaching had set her apart in a system marked by bureaucratic challenges and indifference. With a voice imbued with sincerity, she recounted not only Marcus's countless acts of kindness, but also the quiet leadership he consistently demonstrated during group projects, where he often guided his peers with a gentle hand and a keen insight that inspired collaboration. She painted a picture of a young man who, despite facing significant hurdles, had displayed remarkable resilience and a glimmer of brilliance in his academic pursuits. Throughout their time together, she had witnessed Marcus's unwavering commitment to helping others. Whether it was tutoring fellow students struggling with difficult subjects or organizing small community service initiatives, the tales she shared underscored a narrative far removed from that of a criminal. Instead, they positioned Marcus as a young man ensnared by the systemic failures of a society that had neglected to provide him with the support and opportunities he desperately needed. Her testimony left a profound impact on everyone present, prompting them to reconsider the rigid labels often affixed to young people like Marcus, and urging them to acknowledge the potential for redemption that exists within each individual, regardless of their circumstances. Throughout the day, the courtroom became more than just a venue for legal deliberation. It evolved into a compelling microcosm of the broader social conflicts at play within society. As advocates on both sides presented their cases, it became evident that Marcus's trial was not merely about a petty theft. It represented a poignant commentary on the unequal distribution of opportunity and justice in a fractured world. Each argument resonated like a ripple through the audience, highlighting the systemic inequities that had contributed to Marcus's unfortunate choices. In that hallowed hall of law, the myriad factors that had nudged him toward a desperate act, economic hardship, societal neglect, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness, were laid bare for all to see. The spectators, many of whom had witnessed their own struggles against similar injustices, sat in rapt attention as the truths of Marcus's life spilled forth, challenging them to reflect on their own roles in a society that often prefers to look away from its most vulnerable members. As the trial progressed, tensions within the courtroom grew palpable, with each witness adding layers of complexity to the narrative. The defense attorney, a seasoned advocate known for her fiery passion and unwavering commitment to justice, painted a portrait of a young man trapped in a dire situation. "This is not merely a case of theft," she implored the jury, her voice steady yet imbued with urgency. "It is a reflection of a system that has failed him at every turn, a system that promises opportunity yet delivers despair." Her words resonated deeply, echoing the sentiments of many who believed that circumstances often dictate the course of a life far more than one's choices. Across the aisle, the prosecutor held a different view, arguing that accountability must be upheld irrespective of context. "We cannot excuse crime simply because someone has faced hardships," he asserted, attempting to appeal to a sense of order and social responsibility. His resolve, while based on a well-intentioned notion of justice, ignited an undercurrent of dissent among the audience, an implicit questioning of whether true justice could exist in a society riddled with disparities. As the day wore on, observers began to witness the trial as a mirror reflecting societal attitudes. During breaks, whispers filled the air, discussions about the ethics of punishment versus rehabilitation, the roles of privilege and access in the judicial system, and the very essence of what it meant to be judged fairly. Dozens of perspectives clashed and mingled, revealing the audience's frustrations and shared experiences with systemic failure. At one crucial moment, a character witness for Marcus, his former high school teacher, took the stand, her voice quaking with emotion as she recounted the traits that made Marcus special. "He was bright, full of potential," she remembered tearfully, "but the resources that should uplift him, mentorship, guidance, stability, were all systematically stripped away." Her testimony struck a chord, opening a floodgate of empathy within the room, as those present began to visualize Marcus not just as a criminal, but as a product of the broken system surrounding him. In that moment, the trial became more than a legal proceeding. It transformed into a rallying cry for social change. People began to feel the urgency for reform, a clarion call to address the primacy of human dignity over mere law enforcement. As the day closed with closing arguments, the stakes felt higher than ever, and it seemed that the verdict would resonate far beyond this single case, shaping the very principles on which societal justice was founded. The discussion continued long after the courtroom doors closed, spilling into community forums, coffee shops, and social media threads as everyday citizens engaged in thoughtful discourse. Questions emerged. How could they advocate for change? What could be done to ensure equitable opportunities for all? Were they, too, complicit in a system that often marginalized the less fortunate? The trial had sparked not just a need for a verdict, but ignited a movement of awareness and activism, echoing the sentiments of those who believed in a better, more just future. When the moment arrived for the judge to render his verdict, the atmosphere in the courtroom was taut with expectation. A palpable tension filled the air, wrapping around every observer like a heavy veil. Families huddled close, fingers intertwined, and friends exchanged nervous glances that spoke volumes of their shared anxiety. Marcus's heart pounded with dread and hope intertwined, as if each beat was an echo of his internal battle between guilt and redemption. Memories of his struggles flashed before him, the desperate nights spent calculating impossible choices, and the dreams that had become mere shadows of their former selves. The judge, after a long pause that seemed to stretch for an eternity, spoke in a measured tone that resonated throughout the silent room. He acknowledged the myriad factors that had led Marcus to commit the theft. A momentary lapse born of unrelenting pressure and a lack of viable alternatives, as well as the systemic failures that had perpetuated his dire circumstances. Rather than imposing a harsh sentence which would have further entrenched Marcus in a cycle of despair, the judge chose a more compassionate approach. He ordered a combination of community service, regular counseling sessions, and strict probation, tools not just for punishment, but also for healing, growth, and the restoration of hope. In that moment, the courtroom transformed from a place of judgment to a space of potential and new beginnings. The decision was met with mixed reactions within the community, reflecting the complex tapestry of opinions and emotions that such cases often evoke. Some community members felt the sentence was far too lenient, viewing it as a missed opportunity for justice, while others saw it as a rare and hopeful opportunity for true rehabilitation. A chance for Marcus to turn his life around rather than be consumed by the shadows of his past. As discussions unfolded in local coffee shops and on social media platforms, the polarization of viewpoints illuminated deeper societal questions about accountability and the potential for redemption. For Marcus, however, this decision marked the beginning of a transformative journey that would shape him in profound ways. The courtroom, once a stark arena echoing with the reminders of his past mistakes, began to morph into a symbol of change and rebirth for him. In that pivotal moment, he started to grasp a crucial realization. While his actions did carry consequences, he also held the power to redefine his narrative. It was a moment steeped in introspection, where he vowed to not let his previous choices solely dictate his identity. Surrounding him was a burgeoning sense of responsibility, not just to himself, but also to the community that had been affected by his actions. Here he began to forge a path where accountability entwined with hope for a second chance, illustrating that everyone is capable of growth, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem. As days turned into weeks, Marcus immersed himself in community service initiatives, seeking ways to give back and mend the fractures caused by his previous actions. He volunteered at local outreach programs, working alongside individuals who had faced their own struggles and sought redemption. Each encounter was a reminder of the interconnectedness of their stories, reinforcing the notion that healing was a collective journey. With every act of service, Marcus felt more anchored, more purpose-driven. He was not merely reclaiming his life, but helping others reclaim theirs as well. Simultaneously, he sought out mentors, individuals who had once walked similar paths but had emerged stronger on the other side. Listening to their stories of resilience further fueled his desire to change. Inspired, Marcus began to write down his own experiences, hoping to channel his pain into something that could inspire others. His notebook filled with reflections, lessons learned, and aspirations for the future. Writing became not just an outlet, but a form of catharsis, allowing him to articulate the struggles he faced and the triumphs that came with each small victory. Along this journey, Marcus also formed bonds with people in his community, all united by a shared vision of positivity and growth. Together, they organized workshops that focused on conflict resolution and personal development. These gatherings became a sanctuary, a space where individuals felt safe to express their fears and ambitions. Within this embrace of camaraderie, Marcus found a deeper understanding of empathy. He learned that true strength lies in vulnerability, that sharing one story can ignite flickers of hope in another. However, not every moment was easy. There were days when shadows of self-doubt crept in, echoing the remnants of his former self. On those days, Marcus would remind himself that the journey of transformation isn't a linear path. It is a terrain of ups and downs, of setbacks and comebacks. He believed that each stumble carried its lesson, pushing him to reevaluate his motivations and intentions. To combat the negativity, he incorporated mindfulness practices into his daily routine, finding solace in meditation and grounding exercises that nurtured a sense of inner peace. As time passed, the ripple effect of Marcus's efforts began to manifest. He noticed changes not only within himself, but also in the eyes of those he interacted with. Families began to reconnect. Friendships were rebuilt, and trust slowly returned to fractured relationships. It became evident to him that healing was not just an individual pursuit. It was a community endeavor that thrived on compassion and support. Ultimately, Marcus's journey unfolded into a broader narrative, one that spoke to the human spirit's enduring capacity for change and resilience. He decided to share this narrative not just through words, but by actively championing youth mentorship programs, helping the next generation to navigate their own crossroads with wisdom gleaned from his experiences. In doing so, he transformed the courtroom's legacy from one of judgment to a beacon of hope and second chances. Through this unwavering commitment to change, Marcus discovered that the essence of his identity wasn't solely rooted in his past, but in the actions he took in the present to build a better future. And in this journey of self-discovery and community building, he fulfilled the promise he made to himself, to embrace accountability and ultimately to spread the message that redemption is not just an attainable goal, it's a way of life. As he navigated through the challenges that came with his newfound outlook, Marcus found motivation in the stories of others who, like him, sought to redefine their paths. He started a weekly gathering in his local community center, where individuals shared their experiences and insights on accountability and change. Each meeting became a sanctuary, a space where vulnerabilities were met with empathy and hope ignited. It was here that he realized the power of collective narratives, his story intertwined with those of others, creating a rich tapestry of resilience. Marcus also took it upon himself to reach out to local schools. He organized workshops aimed at empowering youth, emphasizing the importance of making choices that align with one's values. To him, the youth represented an untapped reservoir of potential. Through interactive sessions, he challenged them to think critically about their decisions and the impact of their actions on their futures. Each testimony he heard from a young person only reinforced his belief that change starts within. Beyond the workshops, he began collaborating with local artists to create murals that depicted themes of transformation and hope. These visual representations decorated the once bleak walls of the community, turning them into beacons of inspiration. The art resonated deeply, drawing in passers-by and, slowly but surely, igniting conversations about second chances and the beauty of starting anew. Yet with every step forward, Marcus faced moments of doubt. There were times when the weight of his past threatened to overshadow his progress. He learned to acknowledge these feelings without letting them dictate his actions. Instead, he turned to his community, leaning on the bonds he had formed, seeking support when the shadows crept in too close. In doing so, he reinforced a powerful truth. Even the strongest among us need help, and there is strength in vulnerability. As months turned into years, the ripple effects of Marcus's commitment began to manifest beyond his community. Inspired by his journey, many participants in his workshops began to implement change in their own lives and started similar initiatives in neighboring towns. The notion of accountability spread like wildfire, evolving into a grassroots movement that illuminated the darkness of despair with stories of triumph. And as Marcus stood back to watch it all unfold, he felt a sense of fulfillment that transcended personal victory. He was part of a legacy that changed lives. Through it all, Marcus remained rooted in the understanding that redemption is an ongoing journey, not a finite destination. Each day presented a choice, a chance to either dwell in what once was or to actively carve a path toward what could be. With every interaction, every story shared, he wove the fabric of a community united by the relentless pursuit of betterment, one choice at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the small town, Marcus found himself reflecting on the faces he had encountered that day. Each person carried their own burdens, yet in their shared conversations, glimmers of hope emerged. It was in the laughter of a child chasing fireflies and the kind words exchanged between neighbors that he saw the seeds of transformation taking root ever so slowly in the hearts of those around him. With each sunrise, Marcus reminded himself of the importance of resilience. He initiated community workshops, encouraging individuals to voice their struggles and dreams, believing that vulnerability was a strength rather than a weakness. The gathering spaces buzzed with stories that ranged from tales of loss to those bursting with joy. In these exchanges, they began to forge connections, realizing that they were not alone in their experiences. Together, they were a tapestry of shared humanity. As the weeks turned into months, a palpable shift began to emerge. Bonds strengthened not only through shared pain, but through collective triumphs. Marcus watched as a neighbor, once withdrawn and distant, took the stage at a local event to share her journey of overcoming addiction. The applause that erupted from the crowd was not just for her courage, but an acknowledgement that each step toward healing mattered, both for the individual and the community as a whole. In these moments, Marcus understood that the essence of true redemption lay in the vulnerability of sharing one's truth. It was here, in the spirit of openness, that barriers dissolved, paving the way for laughter, tears, and resilience to flourish. He often reminded his neighbors that while the journey of redemption might be daunting, it was always enriched by the warmth of companionship. This collective movement towards healing ignited new initiatives. Community gardens blossomed where barren land once stood, and neighbors began to support local artists to bring color and vibrance back to their town. Art became a powerful medium through which they could express their struggles and aspirations, bridging the silent gaps that had once divided them. It transformed their experiences into a narrative of hope that echoed across the streets. With every story they shared and every layer of stigma they peeled away, Marcus's belief in the transformative power of community continued to deepen. It was a living testament that redemption was not just a solitary voyage, but a communal expedition, Their strength lay in unity. And as he stood at the center of this shared journey, watching the winds of change sweep through, Marcus knew that they were not merely seeking redemption, but building a legacy of resilience for future generations, one heart at a time. Returning to school after the trial was a challenge that tested Marcus's resilience in ways he had never imagined. The echo of courtroom discussions and the weight of public scrutiny loomed over him as he re-entered the halls of his once familiar high school. His teachers, now aware of the broader context of his actions, offered him a mixture of support and caution. His academic performance, once a source of pride, was suddenly under the microscope of his past transgression. For weeks, Marcus struggled to concentrate on his lessons. The classroom, filled with the chatter of peers who either pitied him or whispered speculative comments, became a battleground for his inner conflict. Yet amid the whispers and occasional stares, there were also supportive nods from friends who had known him for years. One such friend, Jamal, reached out with simple acts of kindness, a shared lunch, a quiet conversation after class, reminding Marcus that, despite his mistake, he was still valued as a person. It was during this difficult period that Marcus encountered Mr. Daniels, a former attorney who had turned his focus to community advocacy and youth empowerment. Mr. Daniels saw in Marcus not just the misstep of a troubled youth, but the raw potential of a mind that had been nurtured in spite of hardship. He became a mentor, helping Marcus navigate the labyrinth of guilt, resolve, and aspiration. Through long discussions that often extended late into the evening, Mr. Daniels encouraged Marcus to see his journey as a testament to the power of redemption and the importance of using one's experiences as a catalyst for change. Under Mr. Daniels' gentle guidance, Marcus enrolled in a community-based restorative justice program. The program was designed not only to address the root causes of his actions through counseling and academic support, but also to provide him with practical skills for the future. Participating in group sessions with other young people who had faced similar challenges, Marcus slowly began to disentangle his identity from the event that had once defined him. With every session, he reused his pain as a stepping stone toward understanding systemic failures and the urgent need for empathy in the application of justice. In these sessions, Marcus learned that he was not alone in his struggle. Stories of other youths caught in cycles of poverty and discrimination emerged as poignant reminders of the broader societal issues at play. They spoke of families torn apart by economic pressures, of communities left to fend for themselves in the absence of robust social support, and of dreams stifled by forces far larger than any individual could overcome. For Marcus, the collective wisdom of these stories was both a comfort and a call to action. Slowly, he began to channel his frustrations into academic and creative pursuits. His teachers noticed a renewed focus in his studies, an undercurrent of determination in every assignment. What had once been an act driven by desperation became a source of introspection and motivation. Marcus started writing poetic journals of the intertwined pain of societal neglect and the promise of individual transformation. His writings, filled with raw honesty, began to circulate among his peers, sparking discussions about the true meaning of justice, empathy, and redemption. Marcus's renewed commitment to his education was not without setbacks. There were days when the memories of the trial and the stigma attached to his deed would threaten to pull him back into despair. The hallways of his school, once a sanctuary of learning, now occasionally echoed with conversations that seemed to isolate rather than include him. Yet with each obstacle, the young student found himself drawing strength from the very community he had once felt alienated from. As Marcus navigated the choppy waters of recovery, a journey marked by ups and downs, his experience began to attract attention that reverberated far beyond the confines of the courtroom and the hallways of his school. Community leaders, educators, and social activists began to see his trial as emblematic of a larger, systemic failure, a failure to safeguard the potential of youth in marginalized communities. It became clear that Marcus's case was not an isolated incident. Rather, it was a reflection of a larger narrative that highlighted the systemic barriers and injustices faced by countless young individuals. Local newspapers and advocacy groups eagerly picked up his story, not to shame him, but to spotlight the urgent need for comprehensive reform in the juvenile justice system and the social safety net. This ripple effect not only brought the community together, but also ignited conversations about the importance of investment in education, mental health resources, and holistic support services for youth. As editorials filled with passionate pleas for change circulated, they painted a vivid picture of Marcus as a courageous young man who, despite his challenges, embodied resilience and hope. His struggles resonated with many parents and guardians who feared for their own children, and in doing so, transformed him into a symbol of the fight against the systemic inequity. Admirers and allies began to rally behind him, organizing community forums and workshops to engage local youth and their families in discussions about their rights and the systemic changes needed to foster a safe and supportive environment for all. Marcus, once a quiet participant in his own life, found himself at the center of a burgeoning movement advocating for justice, empowerment, and opportunity, urging decision-makers to recognize the latent potential within every child, particularly those whose dreams are too often stifled by circumstance and inequality. In a town hall meeting held at the community center, a palpable energy filled the room as voices rose to speak of the untapped potential among the youth, discussing the pervasive educational inequity that stifled ambition and the dire need for economic upliftment that many in the community so desperately craved. Marcus, a young man with a complex narrative shaped by personal hardship, was invited to share his side of the story, a moment that carried both promise and weight. Although he felt a wave of hesitation wash over him at the prospect of addressing the audience, he quickly recognized that his experiences could illuminate the struggles faced by countless others trapped in similar cycles of despair and hopelessness. Standing at the podium, with a mixture of apprehension and fragile pride coursing through him, he took a deep breath and recounted his ordeal with unvarnished honesty. He began by examining the roots of his challenges, not as a mere collection of poor choices, but as the outcome of systemic failures that overshadowed his youth. Each word was carefully chosen, not to elicit sympathy, but to underline the harsh realities that forced him into a corner where every alternative seemed out of reach and where dreams faded like distant echoes. He spoke of nights spent grappling with uncertainty and days spent navigating a world where opportunities were as scarce as hope, urging those who listened to consider the larger forces at play. Through his narrative, he shed light on the complexities of survival in a landscape of economic marginalization, urging the community to recognize not just his story, but the many silent stories around them, craving acknowledgement and understanding. His words struck a chord, resonating deeply within the hearts of those present. As the reflective silence enveloped the room, a palpable shift occurred. Many in the audience began to shift their perceptions, seeing beyond the stark label of thief. Instead, they recognized a complex young man, a product of societal neglect, molded by circumstances and a system that had long forgotten those living in its shadow. Each story shared seemed to unravel a thread of empathy, weaving a tapestry of understanding that brought a sense of unity among them. The meeting ended with a fervent call for change, a collective awakening to the pressing need for improved funding for schools that could offer hope and opportunity, accessible mental health support to mend the invisible wounds, and the establishment of community programs designed not only to intervene, but to actively preempt the cycle of despair that could easily lead a bright student astray. This was not just a plea for assistance, it was a declaration that their community had the power to cultivate resilience, restore dignity, and foster a future where every voice mattered and every life had the chance to flourish. Marcus's voice became a bridge between contrasting worlds, the harsh reality of underprivileged communities and the promise of structured support and reform. As he navigated this journey, he realized that the disparities he once viewed as insurmountable could be addressed through collaborative effort and shared purpose. Through further community outreach initiatives and his continued participation in restorative programs, he found himself at the heart of a grassroots movement, one that echoed the struggles and dreams of those he grew up with. Together with local organizations, he began to plan workshops and mentorship programs aimed at empowering at-risk youth, offering them the tools and encouragement they needed to break free from cycles of despair and hopelessness. His personal narrative, once a source of guilt and shame that weighed heavily on his heart, transformed into a beacon of hope and resilience for many. By openly sharing the lessons learned from his own setbacks, he not only ignited a spark of inspiration in others, but also fostered a sense of community and solidarity where each individual could see the potential for change in their own lives. With each passing month, Marcus realized that while the past could not be undone, it could be transformed into a powerful agent for change, reshaping the very fabric of his identity. He discovered that embracing his past mistakes was not a sign of weakness, but rather a testament to his resilience and determination to grow. As he sat in his favorite corner of the library, surrounded by towering shelves filled with volumes of history and literature, Marcus felt an invigorating sense of purpose. His academic performance, once derailed by the emotional toll of his court case, began to shine anew, illuminating possibilities he had once thought unreachable. Encouraged by teachers and mentors alike, who recognized the spark within him, he dove into his studies with a fervor that transcended the mere desire for grades. It became a quest for personal redemption, a way to reclaim his narrative and earn the future he envisioned for himself. History and literature classes in particular provided him with profound insights into how societies have long struggled with issues of class, race, and the nuances of the human condition. Through the stories of figures like Nelson Mandela and Maya Angelou, he found reflections of his own journey, narratives filled with adversity yet abundant in hope. Each lesson was like a lifeline, pulling him deeper into the complex tapestry of humanity and reminding him that growth often arises from the ashes of hardship. Outside the classroom, Marcus found a profound solace in the written word, a sanctuary where his thoughts could breathe and flourish. His journals transformed into more than mere pages filled with personal confessions. They evolved into insightful essays that delved into the intricate nature of justice and human fallibility. In one poignant essay, he meticulously described the courtroom, the austere space characterized by its heavy wooden benches and the oppressive weight of silence that hung in the air. He captured the measured cadence of the judge's speech, each deliberate word echoing a sense of authority and finality. The tearful testimonies shared within those walls became not just narratives of loss, but a collective reflection on the human experience, portraying the courtroom as a stage where society grappled with its own contradictions and moral dilemmas. Among his reflections, he wrote about the community social worker who had gently navigated through the layers of his troubled past. With an almost maternal authority, she revealed the true causes behind his desperate act: inequitable circumstances, systemic failures, and a severe lack of support. This compassionate insight allowed him to see the multifaceted issues that led to his actions, enabling a deeper understanding of himself and the societal constructs that often misunderstood individuals like him. Additionally, he reflected on the teacher who had believed in him when the world saw only a delinquent, a visionary who had illuminated the path of possibility amidst the fog of despair. Her unwavering faith sparked a flicker of hope within him, inspiring him to pursue the light rather than succumb to the shadows that had threatened to engulf him. These writing sessions became a form of therapy for him, a refuge where the chaos of his life could momentarily retreat. Each carefully chosen word felt like a powerful release, unraveling the tightly woven threads of shame and guilt that had congealed around him since that fateful day when everything changed. As Marcus sat with his pen, pouring his thoughts onto the page, he was not just recalling the past, he was engaging in a fierce dialogue with his inner self. This process forced him to confront the emotions he often buried deep, feelings of regret, anger, and loss. Through fervent introspection, he began the painstaking journey of forgiveness, like a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble to reveal the figure within. Gradually, the thief that the world had hastily labeled him transformed into a young man awakened to his potential, a seeker of truth eager to rewrite his narrative. Instead of being shackled by his past mistakes, Marcus discovered a new purpose fueled by an unwavering determination to challenge the very structures that had contributed to his downfall. He saw the societal injustices, economic disparities, and the stigmas attached to people like him, those written off before they had the chance to thrive. His writing became a powerful vehicle for change, a way to raise his voice for the voiceless and to advocate for a future where potential was not defined by circumstance. Each session not only deepened his understanding of himself, but also ignited a passion to uplift others trapped in similar struggles, emphasizing the belief that redemption is possible if one dares to reclaim their story. This transformation was not instantaneous. It was a complex process marked by both triumphs and tribulations. It came in fits and starts, a series of setbacks followed by illuminating moments of clarity and significant progress. There were days when the weight of his past felt unbearably heavy, as if it were a smothering blanket suffocating any semblance of hope. Evenings descended into long, restless hours when the haunting echoes of shame and regret threatened to pull him into an abyss of despair. Yet during these darkest moments, when the urge to surrender to that consuming darkness loomed large, Marcus clung fiercely to a promise he had made to himself: to use this painful experience as a bedrock for a brighter future. This vow was not merely a transient whisper, it became a powerful mantra that fueled his resolve. He envisioned a life not only transformed by his own experiences, but one that became a beacon of hope for countless others ensnared in similar struggles. With every small victory, he fortified his belief that redemption was not just a possibility, it was an imperative, a transformative force capable of inspiring change in the lives of others seeking liberation from their own past. As the months gracefully transitioned into a full year, the court-ordered counseling and community service served not just as a mandate, but as a pivotal turning point in Marcus's life. These sessions provided him with a safe haven to confront the emotional turmoil that had long haunted him, allowing him to unpack layers of pain and regret. Through open dialogues with counselors, he began to unravel the tangled threads of his past, gaining a profound understanding of himself and the motivations behind his decisions. With each passing week, he peeled back the calluses of his former life, discovering not only his inner demons, but also the strength that lay within to overcome them. Simultaneously, his commitment to community service became a conduit for healing. Engaging with those less fortunate ignited a sense of purpose in Marcus, a realization that he could contribute positively to the world around him. This newfound sense of responsibility not only instilled a deep pride in his actions, but also helped foster meaningful relationships with mentors who inspired him to aim higher. As his academic performance began to improve, teachers who once viewed him through a lens of skepticism now recognized the spark of potential buried beneath his past mistakes. They saw not just a student, but a young man hungry for redemption. Recommendations flowed in like a tide, ushering him into advanced classes and enriching extracurricular programs where he flourished. Surrounded by peers who shared his aspirations rather than his missteps, he transformed into a beacon of encouragement, igniting conversations about dreams, passions, and future possibilities. In this nurturing environment, the foundations of a brighter future were laid, allowing Marcus to envision a life defined by achievement rather than regret. Marcus's relationship with education took on a transformative dimension that transcended the confines of traditional learning. No longer was school merely a place to absorb information from textbooks. It evolved into a battleground where he fervently fought for his dignity, self-worth, and an equal chance at success in a world that often tried to marginalize him. Each classroom became a sanctuary where he could redefine himself, and every lesson learned was a stepping stone toward reclaiming a future that once felt impossibly out of reach. With each homework assignment he tackled, he poured not just his time, but also his heart into the work, determined to rise above the circumstances that threatened to define him. Every exam he faced became an opportunity to demonstrate his resilience and tenacity, as he strove to outmaneuver the obstacles that had previously loomed large in his life. The education he received was not just academic, it became a powerful tool for empowerment, allowing him to challenge the status quo and advocate for meaningful changes within his community. As he engaged with diverse ideas and critical thinking, Marcus realized that his educational journey was about more than personal achievement. It was about using knowledge as a catalyst for broader social impact. He began to see his role as an agent of change, inspired to empower his peers and uplift his neighborhood. His success in school fueled a burning desire to give back, inspiring him to reach out to younger students and share his story of triumph over adversity. Through mentoring and community involvement, Marcus transformed his personal struggles into a collective strength, embodying the belief that education could not only change lives, but also reshape communities. In a turning point that was both symbolic and deeply personal, Marcus applied for a scholarship designed to help underprivileged students pursue higher education. His application was a heartfelt essay recounting his struggles, the systemic forces that had nearly derailed him, and his determination to emerge as a changemaker. The scholarship committee, moved by his honesty and resilience, awarded him the funds necessary to attend a reputable college. This moment was not just a personal victory, it was a declaration that even the darkest chapters could serve as the prologue to a redemptive story. College, with its fresh challenges and newfound freedom, was a stark contrast to the rigid confines of high school and the memories of the courtroom. Yet Marcus carried with him the lessons taught by his past. At university, he became an active participant in discussions about social justice, minority rights, and educational equality. He took on leadership roles in student organizations aimed at bridging the gap between marginalized communities and academic success. His voice, once muffled in the courtroom of his youth, now roared in lecture halls and community panels. Years would pass, and Marcus's life continued to evolve, a testament to the transformative power of understanding, compassion, and second chances. His journey from that fateful day in the convenience store to standing as a respected advocate for justice was not without scars, but each mark served as a reminder of how far he had come. In quiet moments of reflection, he would revisit the halls of the juvenile court in his mind, not with shame, but with gratitude. That experience had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about society, and in doing so, had ignited within him a relentless drive to foster change. Marcus's story resonated with countless others. He was invited to speak at community events, schools, and even on national platforms, where he discussed the intricacies of youth justice, the need for equitable educational resources, and the importance of societal empathy. His early experiences, tainted by societal neglect and economic despair, had been transformed into a living curriculum on resilience and redemption. In one memorable address at a local high school, Marcus told a group of students, "I stand before you not as a perfect person, but as someone who has learned that mistakes can be the stepping stones towards growth. Our society is flawed, and the systems that govern us are imperfect. But within each of us lies the power to change our story. I want you all to know that your past does not define your future. It is what you do after you fall that truly matters." His words sparked a silent revolution, a sense of hope among the youth, a belief that even in the darkest moments, a path to redemption exists. Marcus's journey became a living case study in community-led rehabilitation, a narrative that called for systemic change while affirming the intrinsic worth of every individual, regardless of the circumstances of their upbringing. As the years wore on, Marcus continued to advocate for reform in the juvenile justice system. He worked tirelessly to influence policy, collaborating with legal experts, educators, and community activists. His own experiences lent a credibility to his advocacy efforts that statistics or abstract theories could never achieve. Each policy meeting, each community forum he attended, was imbued with the fervor of a young man who had once been on the brink of losing himself, and who now, through trial and transformation, had found purpose. The courtroom incident that had once threatened to shatter Marcus's educational prospects and personal identity ultimately became the crucible from which a newfound sense of purpose emerged. His story reminded everyone that behind every statistic of juvenile delinquency lay a complex web of socioeconomic factors, personal struggles, and systemic injustices. It underscored that while redemption may not come easily, it is attainable with understanding, support, and the willingness to change. Toward the twilight of his journey through academia and advocacy, Marcus looked back on the many twists and turns that had shaped him. He was no longer defined by a single moment of error, but by his continual efforts to overcome adversity. His education had become a battleground of ideas, a space where the failures of the past were dissected, understood, and used as stepping stones for building a more inclusive future. His transformation was a reminder that society must look beyond immediate transgressions and examine the underlying causes that drive behavior. In the end, Marcus's narrative was one of gradual, deliberate transformation. The petty theft that had once marked him as a delinquent was, in retrospect, a desperate cry for help, a symptom of a larger societal ailment. His subsequent journey through pain, judgment, and rehabilitation underscored the need for compassion over condemnation, for systemic support over punitive measures. Marcus Johnson's life stands as a poignant reminder that every individual, regardless of their background or mistakes, holds the capacity for redemption. His story, etched in the annals of a courtroom, whispered in the corridors of a troubled school, and broadcast in the heartfelt addresses to communities, continues to inspire and heal. Today, his voice remains a clarion call for reform, shining a light on the path to a more just and equitable society. As Marcus moved forward into adulthood, his legacy was cemented not just by academic achievements or successful advocacy, but by the enduring belief that every young person deserves a second chance. He championed the idea that education, when provided with empathy and understanding, can be the greatest equalizer, a force strong enough to dismantle the barriers of race, poverty, and social stigma. And so, the long road to redemption that began with a single, fateful error became a journey of personal growth and social awakening. Marcus transformed his experience into a narrative of hope, a narrative urging society to recognize that behind every statistic is a human story, complex and fraught with the challenges of life. His story is a testament to the fact that while life may knock you down, it is the strength to rise again that defines who you truly are. In closing, Marcus's journey reminds us all that redemption is not merely a personal triumph, but a shared responsibility. It calls on communities, educators, policymakers, and citizens alike to build a framework where mistakes become lessons and failures transform into stepping stones toward a brighter future. His transformation was not an isolated miracle, but a collective victory, a beacon of hope for all those who believe in the power of change. Today, in every classroom that embraces diversity, every community center that fosters understanding, and every court that weighs compassion alongside justice, the spirit of Marcus Johnson lives on. His story, a tapestry woven with threads of struggle, resilience, and ultimate redemption, continues to remind us that even in the face of daunting adversity, there is always hope, and that the future, though uncertain, is ours to shape with empathy, learning, and unwavering determination. Marcus's narrative, unfolding in unexpected ways through moments of despair, courtroom drama, and eventual triumph, is a powerful call for social change. It is an invitation to see past a single act of desperation and recognize the intricate network of influences that so often determine the fate of those like him. His redemption is not only his own, it belongs to every community member, educator, and policymaker who dares to dream of a more compassionate and just world. In the end, the lessons learned by Marcus Johnson are timeless, that every life is rich with potential, every mistake holds within it the seed of transformation, and every challenge faced with courage can lead not only to personal growth, but to communal healing. His story is a beacon to all those who struggle in silence, urging them to rise, learn, and build a future defined by hope rather than by the shadows of the past. As the sun set on another chapter of his life, Marcus looked ahead with a calm resolve, knowing that while the scars of yesterday might linger, they were but gentle reminders of the battles fought, the wisdom earned, and the bright, hopeful road ahead. In the interplay between personal responsibility and societal duty, he had found his true calling, to be both a student and a teacher, a beneficiary of redemption, and a passionate advocate for change.